Hello, and welcome to my video on the political economy of nuclear energy. This video will attempt to give you some insight into nuclear energy and try to apply the theories of political economy to the controversial topic. First, I will give you a brief introduction, including how it is produced and touch on its short history. Then I will discuss how two of the theories of political economy can be applied to reach a better understanding of nuclear energy and its role in today's world. Last of all, I will take a position on what I think is best for nuclear energy. So let's start with the introduction to nuclear power. First of all, nuclear power is energy that is released either by splitting atomic nuclei or by forcing the nuclei of atoms together. Splitting is referred to as fission, while combining atoms is known as fusion. Fission is used in the creation of almost all nuclear power today. The energy from these reactions can be harnessed in a variety of ways, but the most popular is to use a steam turbine. During the reaction, the nuclear energy is released in the form of heat. The heat turns water into steam, and the steam drives a turbine that creates electricity. Nuclear fission was first discovered less than 100 years ago by English physicist Ernest Rutherford when he first successfully split an atom in 1919. In the decades following his discovery, Italian, German, Austrian, and Hungarian researchers expanded on his findings and eventually were able to create nuclear chain reactions. From there, researchers from the United States and France used the recently developed science to create nuclear weapons. Most famously, the Manhattan Project was initiated and atomic weapons were developed and eventually used against Japan at the end of World War II. After the war was over, science applied the technology to energy production for military and civilian use. The governments of France, the United States, and the Soviet Union pursued the technology and had plants up and running by 1960. Since then, attitudes towards nuclear energy production have been mixed. Proponents claim that it is a clean, safe way to create massive amounts of energy at a very low cost. Although nuclear energy is a non-renewable source of energy, the Earth has almost an infinite potential to create this energy. There are no greenhouse gases associated with the production of nuclear energy. On the other side, opponents argue that nuclear energy is unsafe, unreliable, and poses a serious environmental and health concern. Most people against nuclear energy find the biggest problem is nuclear waste. Over time, uranium and plutonium used in the reactions become radioactive and can be severely dangerous. When exposure occurs, it leads to death, cancer, and leukemia. After that introduction, I'd like to apply the three theories of political economy to the topic. I'll start with the mercantilist or economic nationalist perspective. Economic nationalists believe it is their right of their nation to limit or promote economic activities to create the best outcome. Their theory can be applied to nuclear energy relatively simply. Some nations have embraced nuclear energy to gain energy independence and insulate their state's economy from price fluctuations resulting from increasing demand and shrinking supply of traditional energies, such as fossil fuels. A prime example of this would be the nation of France. Through government support of nuclear energy, France has developed production that accounts for 80% of their overall use. Clearly, this is evidence that nuclear energy and economic nationalism can successfully be paired to gain energy independence. Next, I'd like to apply the theory of Marxism, or the critical perspective, to nuclear energy. The critical perspective is best at addressing the problems with nuclear energy. Believers of this theory question whether the negative byproducts of nuclear waste are worth the energy created by the method. They attribute the use of nuclear energy to a higher class at the expense of general public or the masses. In their opinion, not only do people suffer, but the environment does also. They are quick to point out the failures of nuclear energy, such as 3 Mile Island in the United States and Chernobyl disaster in the Soviet Union. The 3 Mile Island disaster refers to the worst nuclear energy disaster in United States history. On March 28, 1979, a partial meltdown occurred and tens of thousands of people were forced to evacuate. Fortunately, there were no deaths, injuries, or adverse health effects from the incident. Unlike 3 Mile Island, the accident at Chernobyl was much worse. This accident occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the USSR. It was the result of a complete reactor meltdown. It is estimated that 600,000 people were exposed to radioactive material because of the accident, and at least 4,000 of those people died from cancers attributed to the accident. If Marxists or critical perspective believers had their way, nuclear plants across the world would be decommissioned and no more plants would be built. Because of the two previously mentioned accidents, more and more people have been driven to their side of the discussion. My position on the topic reflects the economic nationalist perspective. I believe nuclear energy can be a major substitute for imported fossil fuels, especially in the United States. Here in the U.S., we have the technology and expertise to build highly productive and safe nuclear power plants, yet we choose not to. The plants we now have run at 90% capacity and are extremely efficient. In fact, the U.S. creates the most nuclear energy in absolute terms, although only 20% of our use comes from this source. Since 3 Mile Island in 1979, the U.S. has not constructed a single nuclear power plant. The last nuclear power plant completed in the U.S. went online in 1996. Meanwhile, China has over 20 plants in construction as I speak. Recently, President Obama announced the United States will pursue the construction of new nuclear plants, citing France, Japan's, and China's long-term success in the field. At the same time, the nuclear waste created by these plants needs to be addressed. We need to develop a new, safer way to store such dangerous byproducts in our country. It is in our national interest to do so. Any disaster stemming from this would derail our attempt to become a major player in the nuclear energy.